Bueno, la penúltima intervención de la mañana antes de ir a comer, que ya he oído por ahí algún estómago haciendo un poco de ruido. Solo nos quedan dos, ánimo. Nuestro siguiente ponente es Web Evangelist en el equipo de relaciones con desarrolladores en Opera, una de las compañías más comprometidas con el desarrollo de esta tecnología. Es también director de producto para Opera Dragonfly. La reproducción de audio y vídeo ha sido un quebradero de cabeza para los programadores durante décadas. Una de las características más perceptibles, digamos, del HTML5 es precisamente la gestión de elementos multimedia en el navegador. Vamos a conocer en detalle el multimedia en HTML5 de la mano de Patrick Lauke.
Okay, I understood the Patrick part, so thank you very much. I don't have much time, so I've obviously chose the biggest topic out there, and I could probably talk, each slide could probably fill about 25 minutes in its own right. Hopefully I'm going to give you an impression of some of the basic things about video and a little bit about audio on HTML5. I won't have time to go into a lot of detail. But as all the other speakers, I'll be around here, so grab me. If you don't want to ask me a question at the end, just grab me whenever you see me. We can go through stuff in more detail. The slides are already online. If you follow the links there, there's also more information about this. So I will be running through this a little bit quickly, and I apologize to the translators over there because they're going to have a hard time keeping up with me, I think. And if my remote works, no, it doesn't. Hey, beautiful. Okay. Forget that. So, as I said, it's video and audio in the title. I am going to concentrate mainly on video, and hopefully it'll become clear why later on towards the end. So, over the years, there've been a lot of different technologies. If you've worked on the web for 10, 12, 15 years, whatever, who here has used things like Real Player or QuickTime or stuff like that to embed things in their pages? Well, we'll have a therapy session about that later. But really, over the years, the one technology that's kind of become the de facto standard, if you will, of delivering multimedia, particularly video and audio on the web, is really Flash. And when you're dealing with Flash, you're dealing with this sort of stuff. This is, if you go to YouTube and go embed, and you use the old school embed version, this is what YouTube regurgitates back at you. It's cargo code. You don't really want to, unless you're a masochist, write this by hand yourself. You take this, you stick this in your pages, and yes, it works. It's great. What it does in the browser itself, it fires up a plugin. It reserves a space in your pages that basically the browser doesn't know what's happening. It's a black box. But inside there, everything's handled by, in this case, the Flash plugin, and it delivers video, audio, handles clicks, and everything else. Of course, this isn't really very ideal, as I say, in terms of if you want to write your markup by hand, for instance, but it doesn't really feel off the web. In HTML, we've had for ages tags to put things like images in the pages, and really we felt at Opera back in 2006, 2007, there should be more. The web has evolved, there is more video content and audio content as well. There should be a better way, a more native way of actually having video in your pages, just the same way that you have images. So in, I think, 2006, 2007, Opera actually proposed the video element. This is the video element in its kind of most simple form. It's just an opening and closing tag, and you just point it like you would with an image. You can point it to a particular video file. There's obviously, over the years, it's evolved, it's been standardized further, more features have been added, so there's a lot of attributes that you can add to your video elements. You can say whether the browser should provide controls. You can annoy all your visitors by auto-playing as soon as they get to your page. You can start kind of playing really bad Polish techno at them. You can mute it, loop it, everything else. Similar to images, you can set a width and a height. Otherwise, as with images, the browser will just take the intrinsic dimensions. And because it's got an opening and closing element, tag, inside the element you can also have fallback content. So for users that can't actually use the video element, that use browsers that have not got that technology available, you can at least provide them with a link to the actual video file, rather than saying it sucks to be you, upgrade your browser. So what does that give us? Well, the markup is a lot nicer and simpler. I mean, I would be quite happy writing markup using the new way of doing it. But fundamentally, it's better, in my opinion, because it gives us video as a native object. It's exactly the same thing as a paragraph, a div, an image element inside your document, because the browser itself is actually handling what is happening in the page itself. It's not delegating on this part of the page. It's the Flash DLL, if you're on Windows, that handles everything. The browser itself actually handles the drawing of the video, and it can treat it exactly the same way as any other element on your page, which has a few nice side effects. Well, one of the side effects really is that not every platform, as we know, there are some devices beginning with I that don't support plugins, specifically Flash. But they have very up-to-date browsers, HTML5 capable, whatever that means today, browsers that can actually play video natively themselves without the need to delegate stuff to an external plugin. So, as I said, one of the side effects of the fact that we now have a video element and the browser's handling that is that it treats it exactly the same way as any other element on the page. Absolutely stupidly simple demo. It's basically for all those that have started doing things with like transitions, CSS transitions and everything else. While the video is playing, I can actually have things like transitions happening at the same time as well. I could start messing around with opacity. I could have 2 or 3 videos running, depending on horsepower of the machine itself. I could layer them. I can fly them in. If I have a classic example, if you do this sort of stuff with Flash, you always have a problem if you've got a light box that needs to come on top of other content that might be Flash-based. There are always tips and tricks and techniques and hacks that you have to use to basically make sure that the Flash content, because that's delegated to a plugin, doesn't shine through any other elements that you put on there. There are techniques to do it, but it's always very cumbersome. Here, the browser handles everything, the drawing, and it can basically manipulate that video and treat it like any other element in your page itself. But beyond being able to layer video in your pages and actually have a bit less kind of markup to type, the one exciting thing with the video element in HTML5, like a lot of the stuff in HTML5, is that it's not just an element itself. There's a lot in the specification of HTML5 concerning the APIs that sit behind there. I think about 70 or 80% of HTML5 is actually definitions of powerful new APIs that are being rolled out, and the video element is certainly no exception. So if you are a JavaScripter, I mean, I'll say it right now, I'm a really bad JavaScripter. I know enough JavaScript to be dangerous, usually to myself, when I play around with things. But even an idiot like me can do at least the basic things with video and JavaScript. There's very self-explanatory methods available. Once you have a reference to your video, you can play, you can pause. There is no stop, strangely enough, but you emulate that by pausing and then resetting it to 0. You can read the current volume, change the current volume, current time, read it or write it. And there's also a boatload of events that are being fired by the video element itself. So obviously, if you are doing things like, I want to know once the video is loaded, so I fire off some function, all of that stuff can be done. An interesting one is, for instance, time update. Once a video is running, every 100 or so milliseconds that event will fire, so you know that the video itself is running, and you could execute certain functions while it's running, for instance, or you can check that the video has ended, trigger some other function. So it's really, really straightforward to work with. There's a good example by one of the guys at the W3C. If you really want to get a complete view of what really happens when you have a video element, there's, as I said, a myriad of events being fired. So if I start off a video here, down here you can see all the various things that are being fired, the attributes and everything else. Obviously this is also all available in the specification, but who reads specifications? We just look at demos, don't we? So it's really quite powerful and exciting. And as I said, if you want to do really simple stuff, it is very simple to basically just put a video in there and control it with just a few lines of JavaScript. Yeah, that's the demo. So to give you an idea, that was a bit overloaded. I've got another page just to give you an idea, and I'll stop this, otherwise. There's also sound. I'm sparing you the sound on these. So here we got, just to clarify the point, to make it really simple, I've got a video element here. I left the controls enabled just to see what's actually going on. Obviously, this is not beautiful and it's not production code, but we got a video element here, and then outside of that, I've just got 2 buttons, a new HTML5 slider, and basically just with 2-3 lines of JavaScript, I can make a really horrible looking, but I can really make controls here for the video. I can play and pause. You see here, every time the time updates, it's actually writing current time to the screen. That value is in seconds, so you have to do a little bit of conversion if you want to work out, hours, minutes, seconds, and everything else. You can change the volume. So at the moment, the volume is all full volume. If I now go down here, I can basically manipulate things really, really simply. And as I said, the code is not optimized at all, but the kernel of that really is. I'm just using play, pause, volume, setting that, and the time update event that I'm listening out for. So it really isn't rocket science to do very simple stuff with the video element. Now, HTML5, a lot of people, they see, the way, for instance, in this case, Opera renders the default controls, and they say, oh, that looks shit. I'd like to style it because my website needs a particular, corporate identity, particular look, particular feel, and everything else. Unfortunately, HTML5 does not specify really what the browser should do in terms of controls. The spec is silent about it should provide a play button, it should provide a seek bar, and a volume control and everything else. That's nothing new. HTML5 itself defines the language, and it defines a browser should be able to handle this, but it never defined, even in the past, for other things like a select element, for instance, it never defines how things should look. Browsers all gravitated pretty much towards the same style of controls because, you can't really reinvent much further how a video can be controlled. There are fairly accepted paradigms there, but every browser will apply their own kind of standard controls to a video element itself. There is no CSS hooks at the moment to actually style these things as well. So, however, because you can actually build your controls very simply with a little bit of JavaScript, one of the powerful techniques that you can use nowadays is just using a little bit of, a few graphics, using all the cool stuff that you're now mandated to use if you're a designer, rounded corners, gradients, and everything else. You can actually build yourself very simply custom controls for video, just using HTML, just using a few of the skills that hopefully you already have. So using pretty much exactly the same code I've got here, but just spending more than 5 seconds putting it together. Here's exactly the same thing. It's using transitions as well. It's using a web font here to actually show the time code and everything else. I can change the volume and so on. Now, in a previous life, I worked as a web editor. Well, actually, when I started, it was webmaster, which probably goes to show how old I was, and the web was still black and white back then. But I remember clearly anything fancy like, a video player on our website, we always had to outsource that to design agencies, and they'd probably, charge us a lot of money, give us the final flash file. They never gave us the actual source files. And then, as with universities and every other big companies, corporate identity changes, we have to change the look and feel of the player. We have to always go back to the design agency. They'd probably get a junior designer to just spend 5 minutes and then charge us another round of money just because it now looks slightly different. Now, if you've got designers or developers already in-house, it's trivial to change these sorts of controls very easily, drop out colors and everything else. It's all just a bit of CSS and stuff. So it's all just leveraging technologies that hopefully designers and developers inside already know and use. And you can do further things because, again, it's a native object. We've had historically all these kind of DHTML hacks and stuff for years. Well, all your DHTML stuff is now cool again because you can just say you're doing HTML5. So really simple things, you've probably seen them on the web for ages, things like you've got little thumbnails and you click on them and it just changes the source of an image that you got there for little image galleries. Well, that sort of stuff you can do obviously now also with a video element. It works exactly the same way, again because now video is a native object and the browser itself is actually handling that particular aspect of it. So stuff like this, it used to be, well, it is possible to do with Flash, but you had to build your Flash movies a certain way, listen out for incoming connections and everything else. By default, Flash as a black box didn't let you manipulate stuff directly from JavaScript. So absolutely trivial example again. I've got a video here, it's running, and then if I just click on these, it simply just swaps out the source of the video element itself. Trivial stuff, but as I said, it is quite powerful being able to do these sorts of things just with basically one line of JavaScript without having to overthink it too much like you would if you had to actually build some kind of Flash container that listens out for incoming calls and everything else. So fairly trivial stuff. Now, all of these things, I'm not going to dwell too much on mobile, but I'll mention some of the stuff. Obviously, the examples I've shown you so far, I've shown you on a desktop device. Now, mobile browsers, I mentioned at the start that they don't have, some devices don't have Flash, but they can deal with this sort of stuff, with video, and we'll see later as well, audio. But there are certainly still pain points at the moment if you want to do this sort of stuff on mobile devices. There's lots more. I'm only going to mention one very particular one, which is in-page display of these video elements. If you've got a tablet device, and whether it's, I don't know, an iPad, and there it's mobile Safari, or some kind of Android device, and there we got Opera Mobile, obviously running as the browser. If you've got a tablet device, these tablet browsers usually are capable of playing video inside a page, as they would on a desktop as well. So effects like the one before where I'm swapping out sources and then it's playing different things, or even the custom controls, they work great on those devices. If you now move back to just a standard mobile device, usually what happens on those devices is, for either technical reasons in some cases or for just ergonomics reasons, they don't play video inside the page itself. As soon as you start triggering a video, they will open up a complete separate kind of video player experience. It might still be the browser actually doing it, but it's taken over the entire screen of the mobile device to play it. So that works great in most cases if all you want to do is actually just show the video. But if you are doing something like have the video running in the background, or if you want to use fancy effects like swapping out the source and things like that, be aware that that can still be a problem. So on mobile, you can't do a lot of the really clever stuff just yet. I think they're improving, and there'll be probably in the next few months different ways of saying this video I want to play in page or make it full screen. I mean, there is work already now happening on the full screen API. Some browsers already have that. That can probably be leveraged, but it's something to be aware of. Obviously, I'm surprised actually nobody shouted yet at me. It all sounds really great. Yes, we have an element for video, and all browsers can play video now. There is obviously a big elephant in the room, and it's not me, although I should go on a diet. It's video formats. There's a big debate. Well, since its inception, there's been a big debate about video formats. HTML5 does not specify in the specification itself. It doesn't say browsers should support this particular container or this particular codec. That's not surprising, again, because if you look through the HTML specification, HTML4 or 3 or whatever, there is, for instance, definition of this is what an image element does, and this is how the syntax is and everything else, but the spec never says browsers should support JPEG or PNG or GIF or GIF or however you want to pronounce it. And it's exactly the same thing with video as well. The spec talks about this is the mechanism by which an author can include video in their page. It doesn't say all browsers must support this particular format. So as ever, there's complications, and particularly with video, money is also involved, which is never a catalyst for really speedy development on these things. There are three main formats that have kind of been duking it out on the web since the inception over the last few years. There's MP4 H.264, OGG Theora, and WebM with VP8 codec. without dwelling too much on them, MP4 H.264, it's a ubiquitous format. It's likely that if you've got a digital SLR that does video, even like a little flip cam or something like that, or if you start looking at, what's the actual content on a DVD or a Blu-ray, you'll find that it's using MP4 H.264. MP4 is the container, H.264 is the codec. So it is ubiquitous. Every video program can export to this particular format. And yeah, it's great. The only problem with that, with MP4 H.264 is it's royalty encumbered. I'm not a lawyer, luckily. But there is kind of some vague wording. Basically, if you're, in a very simple term, if you're making money with MP4 H.264 content, in theory, you might get a knock on the door of the people who hold the patents and the license for that tell you, we'd like some of that money as well. So there are vague issues around it in terms of royalties and licensing. But certain browsers already support them. So Google Chrome, Safari, and IE9. Ogtheora was the other kind of main format that was out there at the time when the video element was specified. For a while, there was actually discussion about should we say in the spec specifically that browsers need to at least have this as a baseline, but it was chucked out for good reasons, as I said, because, say, image doesn't define that either. Ogtheora is free and open. There are no licensing fees. It's completely, you can do whatever you want with it. Unfortunately, there's not many tools out there. And I say it's not web optimized. The technical term is it's shit. Apologies. It's not really that good. But at the time, it was kind of the best effort that you could have in terms of a free and open counterpart that you could implement in browsers. And then the new kid on the block, although it's been around now for about a year and a half, 2 years, WebM as a container with VP8. It's owned by Google. They basically bought out all the IPR off that particular codec, and they've released it for free to the web. Although some people now argue, is it really free? Is it not? Are there issues because it might be using part of other people's code? Again, I'm not going to go into that. It is open and royalty free as far as this point. It is actually been built to be web optimized, and there is support by hardware manufacturers mainly at the moment. There are chipsets already out there that actually do fast encoding, decoding of WebM VP8. And there's been promises of software vendor support as well. People like Adobe at the launch of WebM 2 years ago, they made positive noises about they will support it. We haven't seen anything yet, so you never know. But that's the promise, basically. Unfortunately, if you kind of followed suit with all the browser icons, you've noticed that there is no, there is no one codec that can do everything. Here I want to mention WebM. I've got IE as a ghost there. IE9 onwards, they use basically the platform itself. So obviously IE is single platform. It only runs on Windows at this point, and well, their phone equivalent. And it will use the framework, the media framework that is in Windows. So if there is a codec installed, and there is a WebM codec provided by Google, if that is installed on the machine, IE9 can also play WebM video. But there is obviously issues, people will need to first install this codec. How is that going to work? But basically, disregarding that, we still have the issue of, if you kept track, that there is no one codec and no one container format that works across all browsers, which is a bit annoying, to say the least, if you're a content developer. This is particularly true on desktop, on mobile devices, and other devices, like, for instance, TV. Opera, we've got a huge presence on embedded systems like TVs. The situation is slightly better because, particularly in Opera's case, I can't talk for the other players, we actually, on devices, hook into, say, the hardware itself of the device. So if your mobile phone is very likely that it has a MP4 H.264 decoding hardware, we will actually hook into that. So Opera Mobile on devices can play MP4 H.264 quite nicely. But yeah, on desktop in particular, there is no one codec that will save you the work. So what to do about that? Well, luckily, the ideas, oops, I'm going to grab a drink. The idea already surfaced while the video element was being spec'd out. And the nice thing with the video element is that you beyond just saying a single source in your video element, you can actually have a whole set of source child elements inside your video element where you specify alternative formats of video. Yes, it's a bit annoying, you have to do multiple encoding, but the safest way to handle stuff at the moment is you need, at the very least, an MP4 and, say, a WebM version. OGG, I think it's only Firefox 3.6 is one of the browsers that still only supports OGG. All other modern browsers, you can basically just do MP4 and WebM, and then obviously you'd have your fallback content for browsers that don't support video element at all. So you can say generically, here's my WebM version, here's my MP4 version. If you want, you can also very specifically add information about the codecs that you're using inside those container formats. And some browsers will only understand a particular format of codec, for instance. I haven't got an example right now. I think at the moment they pretty much handle everything. But there might be situations where you want to serve, I don't know, a high-profile MP4 to one device and a low profile on another device that can only handle that particular thing. So you can really start adding different sources and really specify what these different versions are. A browser that comes across these various source elements will go through them in source order. So for instance, Opera will go in here, it will look at the first one and go, video MP4, no, I can't play that. It will jump to the next line. WebM, yeah, great, I can. Google Chrome, for instance, which at the moment plays all of those formats, will stop right at the first one, at MP4. There is no preferred format that a browser will go for. It will basically play the first one it encounters in source order that it can handle. Now, at this point, really quickly, just a case of understanding the fallback. We've seen that you can provide fallback inside your video element. It's worth noting that, as I said, some browsers don't understand certain types of video, but if that happens, there is a video element, there is, in this case, say, an MP4. We open it in something like Opera. Opera won't show, well, no browser will show the fallback content because the fallback is only if it doesn't understand the video element itself. What happens in these situations is, the browser actually knows what a video element is. It will actually create a video element with controls if you've defined it as well, but then it will remain empty because it basically doesn't know what to do with it. So look out for that. Don't think that, oh yeah, just having a fallback will save me in those situations as well. You can also feature detect the codecs that a browser supports really simply. Can play type, you put all that in there. I love the return values of that function. It's probably, maybe, and so that's great. I want to write specifications that are so specific. So you can actually feature detect this sort of stuff directly from JavaScript as well if you want to. People do moan, I'd have to do multiple encoding. I usually point them to things like this. Yes, you have to do multiple versions at this point. It's the reality of using the video element right now. Unless you want to say specifically, I'm only going to serve video elements to, I don't know, a WebKit-based browser or only to old versions of Firefox. It is the reality, unfortunately, at the moment that you have to do multiple encoding. Another nice aspect of having different source elements is that there is a media attribute defined for source. So I think we'll see a bit more about responsive web design this afternoon, if I'm not mistaken, and it's already been mentioned, but what you can do, for instance, in a very trivial manner, is you can add media query stuff in there, feature detection for media queries directly in your sources. So as a super trivial example, you could have one video element and you define two separate videos. It might be, I don't know, a higher quality version and a lower quality version, and the browser will automatically load whichever one is kind of accurate for that media query specifically. It only does it when you load it. So as an example here the page is quite big, so it loaded this particular video. If I now resize the browser, the video doesn't change, even though I say this is the video for minimum 1,000, this one is for all other sizes. But if I now reload this particular page, you'll see that it actually at that point swaps out. It chooses the video that is most appropriate for that particular media query itself. And importantly, this works on mobile devices as well. So if you've got a tablet, you could load a slightly bigger, higher quality version, and on a mobile device, a slightly smaller one. Be careful, don't use screen size as an indicator of things like bandwidth, for instance, or context, as mobile designers like to call it. There are other things, but in certain situations, if your layout only needs a small video like that, on a smaller screen and a bigger video on a bigger screen, this is something you can start experimenting with as well. And as more media query features will be implemented, I think the media query spec itself is now a candidate recommendation, if I'm not mistaken. There's already work happening on the next version, which is basically just adding more media features that you can start to write kind of logic blocks with. You'll be able to really powerfully target, in a very granular way, target which video should work in which situation. If you still want to obviously target really old browsers, the ones that don't support the video element, well, we've seen the way Flash used to be used before with putting a video on there with an object and an embed and everything else. And we've seen the new way of doing video. Now, video element has a fallback, and a crazy guy called Croc Cayman, I hope that is his real name, he sounds like a Batman villain, came up with the idea of Frankensteining the two together. He calls it video for everybody, and that's now already been used on some big sites as well. So the idea is that, yes, you can have your video element with the various versions on MP4, WebM, whatever. As a fallback, you can then have a slightly cleaned up version of the Flash embed. And the nice thing with Flash is Flash itself can read MP4 H.264 external files, so you don't have to have a fourth version like FLV or something. You can just have a little player script, play a Flash movie that loads that particular external file. And then you can still have fallback for browsers that are really kind of, I can't do video and I don't have Flash at all. So that's a nice little technique. Audio, I've now talked for ages about video. I've actually lost track of time. Audio, I'm not going to go too much into it because audio is essentially exactly the same as video. They're both media element types inside the specification. So all the stuff that I've shown you so far applies to audio as well. There's the minimal version. There's the way of doing different sources. If you're crazy enough, you could have different audio sources depending on the width of the browser for whatever reason. And fallback, and you can even do the video for everybody approach with a Flash bit inside as a fallback for older browsers as well to deliver MP3 in this case. And yes, there is obviously format wars, codec wars here as well. MP3, again, royalty encumbered to a certain extent. Ogg-Vorbis is its kind of free and open counterpart, which as opposed to Ogg-Theora is actually quite good. And then some browsers support WAV, but if you're serving WAV on the open web, I can't really help you myself either. And now, just to make my life even more difficult, Canvas. I'm only going to mention Canvas briefly. Hopefully you're all aware of Canvas. We've seen already some great examples of Canvas use, particularly in gaming. It's kind of really sparked this whole HTML5 gaming movement. The interesting thing with Canvas is, again, because video is now a native object, it is of the web, not just on the web. The browser can also do Canvas, and the two can work together, like ebony and ivory. So you can actually load video content inside Canvas. So with Canvas, you already can access, I don't know, pixel data, manipulate it, and everything else. You can do exactly the same with video as well. You can grab the currently displayed frame of a video, for instance, and if you couple that with, I don't know, a time-updated event, you could have something that keeps firing while the video is playing, and you could analyze the frame of the video and do, hopefully, interesting things with it. So, fairly trivial example here. I've got a video element that's playing, and then just for illustrative purposes, there's a canvas here. Oh, it's a bit stuttery, yeah. And here all I'm doing is just basically turning every pixel grayscale and just displaying that in there. So fairly trivial stuff. You could, obviously if you're cleverer with JavaScript, you can do a lot more with it. But again, this is like 2-3 lines of code, and you've got something that turns on the fly, turns video black and white. There are slightly more useful examples other than making things black and white after the fact. Any of you know Ambilight TVs, the ones with the LEDs at the back, and they kind of light up the wall behind the TV depending on what's being played? Hopefully, it's always a bit subtle. You can just about see it. This is using canvas on the sides here to create a really subtle glow around the video itself. And it uses basically the colors around that video element just on the edges, and then it uses SVG as well to make nice transition. It's very subtle, but it's something that if you've got a video site, you wouldn't just want to add a little bit of pizzazz to the video element. It's something, again, you can do very easily with just a little bit of JavaScript. And it degrades gracefully in terms of if the browser doesn't have, say, Canvas support or JavaScript, you'll have some other way of just showing the video. Nobody loses out on that particular thing. So is it all safe to use right now? I mean, all the stuff here, it is, I won't lie to you, it is all fairly experimental. There's a lot of stuff with video and audio, and Canvas even, that doesn't really work 100%. And we've seen that even on mobile devices, some stuff kind of works, but not really. But, some big sites are already using it. YouTube, if you go anywhere, any video that is not running adverts, will, if you opt into the HTML5 experiment that they've had running for 2 years, it will actually use the video element. Of course, Google have, YouTube have a lot more resources to do all the transcoding, but basically since the launch of WebM, any video you uploaded to YouTube was already behind the scenes being converted to both MP4 and WebM and everything else. So they've been doing it as they went along. And there's a lot of content now basically already out there that is WebM or MP4, basically HTML5 video enabled. If you do anything with the video element, don't do browser sniffing. I can tell you the day I was doing a Flickr search for this was an interesting one. Don't do browser sniffing. It's kind of an old school 1990s, that's how we do web design technique. You'd have to always maintain it. Oh, I know this browser supports video, so I'll only sniff for that UA string. It's not the done thing. As with most HTML5 stuff that is in the specifications, it can be feature detected. And if you're good JavaScripters, which I know you all are, that's how you go about this. In particular, as an example, here's how you would feature detect support for video or audio. You basically just look for, nothing new. You look for, is a particular method of that object defined? And if so, you can start then using audio and video. If you're lazy or efficient, however you want to put it, all of the stuff about building your own controllers, doing the video for all fallback and everything else, you don't have to code it by hand. There is now probably 50 or 60 or however many plugins, jQuery plugins for WordPress or other CMSs like Drupal out there, things like Sublime Video that do everything for you already. So you just kind of like any other jQuery plugin, you don't try to understand it, you just grab that, stick it in your page, and then it will do all the stuff for you. Skinning is also there, that the HTML version of the controls look the same as the Flash version of the controls, etc. Same for audio. JPlayer is a nice little, again, plugin solution as well. Again, it does the using Flash in situations where the audio element isn't available. So it's really nice and easy to get started with these sorts of things. As I said, a lot of the stuff is work in progress. I won't lie to you. There is a lot of stuff. I think we've just heard from Rob previously about audio on mobile devices, for instance, that you have to actually activate an audio element before it plays, so your browser won't automatically play audio in the background. There is issues of how many audio elements, for instance, can play simultaneously on devices. Some devices only allow one single audio element to play at one time, so single polyphony, monophony then. So if you want to have background music and, I don't know, sound effects for games, that can be a bit problematic. It's getting solved. Browsers like Opera, for instance, on Android, we do support, I think, up to 5 or 6 audio streams at the same time. But the default browser on Android, as far as I remember, only supports 1. Things like that. So it's all still very work in progress. And if I've got time, have I got 2 minutes? No, I haven't got 2 minutes. Oh well, I'll still do it. There is other stuff, there is other stuff that's being worked on beyond that. WebRTC, real-time communication, basically how to build chat roulette just with JavaScript. Part of WebRTC is get user media, which is accessing the camera directly from JavaScript. Here's the code. it wouldn't be standards development if there weren't at least two conflicting ways of doing that at the moment, but we're working on that. And I'm now just going to jump into the demo. It's probably going to fail, but really quickly. So this is basically, I think it was mentioned before about privacy and accessing kind of things deeply within your platform. This is Opera 12 beta, just released yesterday. And on mobile, we already have camera access. I can allow this page to access my camera. Beautiful. And now it also uses WebGL. No Flash. It's all just using JavaScript to basically manipulate video data itself. So that's probably the scariest thing you see today. Also, other really stupid things you can do with that, I tried my hand at doing a stupid demo, is QR code readers, because obviously you walk around with your laptop and point at QR codes. Now, it does work on mobile as well. Now, this is probably where it's going to crash, but bear with me. I walk around with a QR code. Yeah, there you go. So it basically, there's loads of JavaScript behind the scenes that analyzes each pixel, tries to find patterns and everything else. But you can basically now build things like stupid QR code readers or more, you'll think of better applications of this just with a little bit of JavaScript without having to use Flash or anything else. And there are things like polyfills that basically use Flash if it's not available. They'll use get user media when available and everything else. So links to those here as well. So I think it's really cool stuff that we can do, even cooler than this. I'm quite excited because, as I said, I'm an idiot. I can only do a little bit of JavaScript, but even I can now do things like QR code readers and everything else. And with that, with apologies for overrunning, thank you very much. Preguntas? Or have we got some? Gracias. No? Oh, there's one there. You're not going to ask me about DRM, because then I'll be here another hour. Oh, yeah, just go for it. I'll steal my control and my thing back. Yeah, that's mine. That's yours.
It's not related to video or audio, but it's related to Opera, so I might ask you. It's about the WebKit prefix.
Oh, yes.
Well, there was, for the people that don't know it, there was some, Opera said that they were going to implement the WebKit prefix in their process because lots of developments had it. And
yeah. I mean, it's a complicated issue, the vendor prefix stuff. I'll try to do it really quickly. There's a lot of content out there, particularly on mobile web, where developers have purely focused on, I'll just make it work on my shiny iPhone or my shiny iPad. And they've used the WebKit vendor prefix. There are some real situations where that breaks completely in other browsers. If you've got, say, white text, and they've put a nice gray gradient behind it, but forgot to set a normal color, a user that doesn't use a WebKit browser, on mobile in particular, they come to that page and it looks like there's no content. So the problem is there's blame on all sides, W3C for not standardizing it quickly enough, browsers like WebKit for not removing their prefix stuff once a spec is stable, and developers for not thinking ahead and adding other prefixes or even the unprefixed version. So Opera took a pragmatic decision after talking with all the other browsers as well. Mozilla are likely to do the same. Microsoft at the time said they would as well, but they're now kind of, I think after seeing the Twitter shitstorm that happened yesterday or 2 days ago, rethinking it. And we're going to support a subset of old stuff that is already stable, but that is still littering the web. Things like WebKit border radius or WebKit box shadow, which are completely stable and work. We're only supporting, I think it's about 6 or 7 of these really old, stable things. And yes, the world is up in arms because now Opera listens to WebKit. Are we going to support every single WebKit? No, we're not. We're only going to support a small subset. And it's purely out of almost like an error correction, if you will. There is a lot of content out there. Our users can't actually use some sites because of, call it laxness of developers for not using unprefixed stuff. And we're just using it as an error correction. So. But it's a complex topic. I'll probably be here another hour, so grab me outside or had a beer at the fiesta tonight. And we'll discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.